Right, we are doing an 8-week course reading Thomas Pynchon's new novel, Shadow Ticket, which comes out October 7th, which is a Tuesday. The class will begin on the following Saturday there, October 11th. It'll be Saturdays, 8 of them, down to November 29th. And it'll be 3 to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Zoom. And so it'll cost $250 if you want to attend it live. If you just want the videos and the classroom discussions, that'd be $150 for that. Make sure you've had your coffee. See you there somewhere in cyberspace. So that's the little pitch ad that I made for it, using their font, not from the book cover, but from another, I think it might have been the audiobook. Now let me say a few words about Thomas Pynchon and Against the Day. We just finished reading through Against the Day. I wanted to make sure I had gotten that novel read because I've read all his other stuff before this novel comes out. And I'm glad we did, because Against the Day is a complete literary singularity. There's nothing else like it. As good as Gravity's Rainbow is, Against the Day is in another universe altogether. You might say that with Pynchon in his epic mode, and V, his first novel in 1963, is in epic mode. Certainly one of the best first novels ever written. No question about that. They're not usually that good. And it's funny because his short stories that he was writing before that weren't particularly special at all. Nothing really. And then one of them, Under the Rose, I think Sub Rosa, then became the core from out of which the novel V grew, which is all about V, Veronica, which means true icon, and Virgo as well, and so forth. All these goddess images in V. And then he followed that with a short thing called The Crying of Lot 49, which is definitely the best of all of his short works, what I call Pynchon Light. And then he goes back to epic mode with Gravity's Rainbow in 1973, maybe? 2 or 3. And that's twice as good as V. It's justifiably famous, but it's sloppily written. It just seems very careless with the prose. He's just throwing words at the page there a little bit, maybe too much of Burroughs' influence there on him early on. But by the time he gets, now he published Gravity's Rainbow when he was 38 years old in astrology, and Pynchon does astrology. He knows it, and he accepts it, and he loves it. In Mason and Dixon, he correctly discusses the 2 birth charts of those 2 men, those 2 scientists, and it's very obvious that he knows astrology, and not ironically, as the Pomo imbeciles would have you believe. He's into all of this stuff. Now, the primary symbol for hypermodernity is the Ur symbol of the multiverse, which means multiple planes, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, multiple realities. There is no one single reality. Just as in his early novels, those first 3 or 4 of Vineland may be included. Vineland's not very good, and it is being turned into a movie this year called, with the unimaginative title of One Battle After the Next, by Paul Thomas Anderson, who is a skilled but questionable director. I think every one of his works that I've seen, except maybe for Phantom Thread, has been flawed. His adaptation of Inherent Vice I thought was a mess. The novel isn't that much better either. It reads like a parody of Pynchon caricaturizing himself. He has a great sense of humor, but those novels are Pynchon light. And his last novel, most recently, I think it was 2013, Bleeding Edge, I don't even remember it. It made so little impression on me. I don't remember it. It was about something to do with the internet and New York City and some female detective, and that's it. It just didn't stick. So very often with Pynchon Light, he's at his best in epic mode. So when he, on his Uranus opposite Uranus, which comes into orb around age 38, this is for everyone, down to about age 44, people usually hit their best work, their home runs, right out of the park there. And so both Gravity's Rainbow and Mason and Dixon, which he was working on right after it for the next 17 years. That's amazing, because Joyce spent 17 years writing Finnegan's Wake, which I think Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake are the 2 greatest novels ever written, but I think Against the Day is the 3rd greatest novel ever written. It makes Blood Meridian look like a comic book by comparison. The difference, it's a quantum leap. Against the Day just blew me away. It's so good. It's the multiverse. He's got people bilocating. He's got different realities where the Chums of Chance with their airship they go down a tunnel through the bottom of the earth into the core of the earth. one bizarre reality after the next. We're not even sure if they're real or not. They may be, we may be reading a kid's adventure story at that point. Now, there is a private detective character in there too, Lou Bassnight, whom the character for this, McTaggart, is it Hicks McTaggart, sort of reminds me of. So this may be in the mode of Pynchon Light. I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like one of his epics. But Against the Day begins in 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair, and then the stage keeps expanding and expanding and expanding with more and more characters all over the planet. Most novels are regional. If you think of McCarthy, you think of either the South, the Deep South, or the American Southwest. If you think of Faulkner, you think of Yoknapatawpha County. For Joyce, it's of course Dublin. My own novels are set in Arizona, and so forth. Not in Against the Day. Against the Day is one of the first novels to presuppose the entire Earth for its region. So it is a perfect cosmological image for hypermodernity, in which we are all uniting together through the power of these technologies as a single human species. The German ethnologist Leo Frobenius had this wonderful model. He had a three-stage model of history where he's talking about the first stage of humanity, and these are stages. They absolutely are. The left can go you know what, as far as I'm concerned. There are stages, just as in geology. There are stages there too. I went through all of them in my book Archive. Maybe there's 15 or so different geological epochs. And within each of those epochs, there's different flora and fauna that is consistent throughout that epoch and evolves within it, but doesn't really change much. And with each of the epochs, there's usually a catastrophe, not just with the dinosaurs, but the Permo-Triassic catastrophe about 220 million years ago, which was almost 99% of life on Earth was wiped out there. So the spirits were wiping the chalkboard clean there to bring in new things. So too with these kinds of stage models. Yes, there is an indigenous aboriginal stage that corresponds exactly to Gene Gebser's magical consciousness structure and to Frobenius's first stage of human history, which he calls demonic, in the sense of seizure or possession by gods and astral beings and so forth, animal spirits, animal totems, all that kind of thing. And then the monumental stage, which is the stage that he saw Spengler writing about in The Decline of the West. And the book that he published in 1921 called Paidoima was his response to Volume 1 of Decline of the West, which came out in 1918. Both thinkers were using the exact same Goethean culture morphological methods to understand cultures from within. And so I'm publishing my translation of Paidoima with the subtitle, An Outline for the Study of Culture Forms from Within. And then so Spengler was then introduced to the works of Frobenius, and he was blown away. And it completely changed his model of history as he started going back into the prehistoric world of the Paleolithic and the Neolithic. But then Frobenius saw us entering into a third phase, and I think this syncs very well with Against the Day, wherein we have a complete unification of humanity for the first time, moving into its old age, where the concern is more. The concern of the first stage is with demons. With the monumental stage, the concern is with ideals and/or Platonic ideas with capital I's. And then the final phase is concerned with facts, but obviously it will be a re-spiritualization of the materialistic stage, a la Rudolf Steiner's idea of the descent of the Archangel Michael into the Earth's astral body in around 1879, with his mission of re-spiritualizing the materialist. It's a transubstantiation, in other words, of the materialist philosophies of the 19th century. And that syncs with Spengler's prediction that we would be entering into a second religiousness right about the time of the formation of the universal state that America is doing, which a point he missed, but which is America seems to be fulfilling that role. And so we're in this third phase now, and I think Pynchon understands that, and I think he's got the multiverse with all the different astral planes and the paranormal and spooky stuff. None of that is meant ironically. It's not even meant ironically in Gravity's Rainbow, and that's generally regarded as the great postmodern novel of all time, and in a way it is, but in a way it's also not. The opening quote from Werner von Braun on the opening page, where he's talking about a sincere belief in life after death, is not meant ironically. The postmodern left has got this wrong. So we're going to sit down and look at Shadow Ticket, because even if it is Pynchon Light is better than most of the pretentious Oprah book club novelists like Jonathan Franzen garbage like that, these big publishing houses, Viking and so forth, Henry Holt and on, keep throwing at us in a very pretentious way with these vain authors who know nothing about the history of literature. They're not dialoguing with the grand themes of humanity that are as old as the caves of the Paleolithic, these monstrous themes that have been with us. Those are what make great literature, not little novels about living in a suburb and talking ironically about your neighbors. That's just ridiculous. That's not literature. Those are children building sandcastles in sandboxes by comparison with Frank Lloyd Wright type architects, or the character in Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis with Faustian grandeur. Coppola deals with the great themes. Not always, but he can hit it out of the park when he wants to, and he did that with Megalopolis. I disagree with the negative reviews of that. I noticed that most of the reviews of that film that came out of Germany understood it perfectly, because they're Germans. They're naturally inclined toward mysticism, and they understand all things occult. That's just how it is. And so that's what we're going to do for this. I'll read his description, and it's obvious that he wrote it. It's obvious on all of his dust jackets that it's written in his style. So, and usually from experience, publishers will ask you to write the description on the dust jacket for the book. Milwaukee, 1932. Now, Against the Day ends in 1922 or 23, right in there. So it really does set the stage in a way. This kind of is a thematic sequel, because now we're in the next decade. The Great Depression going full blast. Repeal of Prohibition just around the corner. Al Capone in the federal pen. The private investigation business shifting from labor management relations to the more domestic kind. Hicks McTaggart, a one-time strike breaker turned private eye, thinks he's found job security until he gets sent out on what should be a routine case, locating and bringing back the heiress of a Wisconsin cheese fortune who's taken a mind to go wandering. Before he knows it, he's been shanghaied onto a transoceanic liner, ending up eventually in Hungary, where there's no shoreline, a language from some other planet, and enough pastry to see Annie Cop well into retirement, and of course no sign of the runaway heiress he's supposed to be chasing. By the time Hicks catches up with her, he will find himself also entangled with Nazis, Soviet agents, British counter-spies, swing musicians, practitioners of the paranormal, of course, outlaw motorcyclists, and the troubles that come with each of them, none of which Hicks is qualified. Forget about being paid to deal with. Surrounded by history he has no grasp on, and can't see his way around, in, or out of. The only bright side for Hicks is it's the dawn of the big band era, and as it happens, he's a pretty good dancer. Whether this will be enough to allow him somehow to Lindy Hop his way back again to Milwaukee and the normal world, which may no longer exist, is another question. Okay, that's it. Shadow Ticket, I'm very excited. Once again, it'll be Saturdays, October 11th through November 29th, 3 to 5 p.m. MST, $250 to attend live, $150 for a subscription to the videos. So if you're interested, just hit me up at my Gmail, which is johndavidebert, one word, @gmail.com. Same address also if you're interested in getting an astrology reading, which is perfectly consistent with the world of Thomas Pynchon. He introduces astrology into Gravity's Rainbow. That's the first book where it's obvious that he's learned it and knows that it works and is not using it ironically. Okay, so hope to see you then in cyberspace somewhere.